Robert Zaichowski is a chartered professional accountant and is making his way up to the stage. He has volunteered with Cycle Toronto for the past 7 years. Getting a 7-year itch yet? Including as a current board member, and writes the Two-Wheeled Politics bike blog. Please welcome Robert.
Thanks, Jen Joy, for emceeing Bike Minds tonight, as well as to the other speakers for your great stories, especially Ryan. Yours was a real tearjerker, man. Yes. While my love for cycling and politics started during my youth, it wasn't until I started biking in Toronto 7 years ago when I decided to combine the two interests. During my time doing bike advocacy, including with Cycle Toronto and writing my blog, as Jen Joy mentioned earlier, I found a path which involved the use of data and personal experiences to affect change, which I would like to share with you. While learning the ropes about bike advocacy, I noticed how far behind Toronto was with their bike plan at the time. I think less than a quarter of it was completed. So I started asking the question, why was the bike plan failing? So, being an accountant, I decided to read into the City of Toronto's budget, given, to paraphrase Brent Tadurian, budgets rather than visions reveal a city's true priorities. While reading the notes on the budget, I noticed the $8 million per year at the time, back in 2014, would have funded 80 kilometers of bike lanes over 10 years. When the bike plan called for almost 500 kilometers, something doesn't add up here, right? Yeah, so I used the next 1 to 2 years to raise awareness about the budget and learn more about it by talking with members of city staff and fellow cycling advocates. One of the things I was able to do is to work with several Cycle Toronto work groups to work on a joint budget submission and do a deputation at City Hall. Cycle Toronto staff took notice when they launched this campaign in June 2015 in response to 3 cycling deaths that month. It included a budget ask of $20 million a year for cycling. City staff were also working on a new bike plan, which for the first time factored in funding. When it was approved in 2016, the cycling budget was doubled to $16 million. Unfortunately, it was not enough. There were several other issues that were identified, such as the city had difficulty fully spending their budget. There was a lack of coordination with major road reconstruction, and almost every bike lane had to go through City Council for approval. So, to take things to the next level and hold City Council accountable, my friend Albert Cole came up with this idea of tracking the bike plan. So throughout the process, we would identify which projects were approved for a given year, and either we would visit the sites ourselves, or we would ask some help of local advocates to confirm whether the project was done. Sometimes we'll ask the city for clarification as well. And since early 2018, we would prepare a year in review in Dandy Horse to present our findings. Last January, we did this article called WTF is Up with the Bike Plan. It revealed only 25 kilometers of bike lanes were installed for the first 3 years. This generated some discussion in the media, and the city ended up rethinking their bike plan, instead focusing on 3-year plans with a long-term cycling network in mind. But unfortunately, things didn't get any better, because last year, only 3 kilometers of bike lanes were installed. And for the first 4 years, less than 10% of the 335 kilometers was installed. It's a disgrace for sure. But to help visualize this lack of progress, I started plotting the new bike lane installations onto this map, with the most recent ones on Scarlet, the Martin Goodman Trail Gap, Corley, and Blue Jays Way in orange. But having this hard-hitting data is even more effective if you can make it personal. So back in 2015, when I was still working in Pickering, I was driving to work. I thought at the time it was too far to bike and using public transit was not practical. However, the Pan Am Games were coming to town, and I remember using Bikes and Go train to visit family in Ajax. I then heard of some people who would bike at least 30 kilometers each way to get to work, which was almost as far as mine. So I thought something had to change. So I decided to look up some routes to get to Danforth GO Station, the closest where I could bring my bike on board. And I realized I could use the waterfront trail from Rouge Hill GO and some quiet streets to get to the office. So on Bike to Work Day 2015, I finally biked to work. And you should have seen the look on my boss's face when he saw the bike at that time. Yeah. But as I was biking more, I started to see things from a new perspective. While in the car you're focused just on getting from point A to point B, you start to seeing the finer things in life, such as on the trail, you never know when you see a bunny hopping along. Or on the streets, you may stumble upon a new establishment for some food or drink or shopping. Yeah, so this picture here, this was one of the Tour de Bloor meetups that was done to help promote businesses along the pilot bike lanes at the time. I also noticed that when riding a bike, it's a lot easier to socialize, and you never know who you end up riding with for at least part of the way. However, biking to work was not without its challenges. When the Toronto Islands flooded in 2017, so did the Rouge River, which meant getting out to that bridge to Pickering was a bit of a wet affair. Though it was still better than going to the next station and have to ride on the sidewalk against a crazy fast arterial. I also didn't feel that safe riding on arterials such as Danforth, and when the Woodbine bike lanes were installed the summer before I switched jobs, I ended up avoiding Danforth altogether. Well, it was great that I could feel safe for getting to Danforth GO. It also meant I couldn't visit some of the shops along the Danforth. And it really goes to show you really need protected bike lanes in order to get people to shop at these arterials, along the arterials such as Danforth and Bloor. So after collecting the data and sharing a story, it was time to bring it home for the campaign, which in my case was to extend the Bloor bike lanes to what's now Runnymede. Yeah, so we did this letter to cite the lack of progress, which got over 100 signatures from businesses in the extension area alone. We handed out thousands of postcards, and we organized this Westward Ho event last April. Well, there are still some key council and committee votes in May to deal with. I remain cautiously optimistic that we will be able to celebrate the new bike lanes this fall. So let's keep asking questions, let's keep collecting data, and let's keep sharing our stories with others outside of this room. Thank you.
That's a lot of money that is not being spent because to get bike lanes has to go through council. Could the money be used for education campaigns on how to navigate bike lanes with cars and cyclists? Would that go through council too, something like that?
I know there are some education campaigns being done as part of Toronto's Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, but many of us advocates would feel that education is no substitute for infrastructure.
Sure.
Kevin?
I'm curious, when they don't spend in a year, is it they lose it, or can they accrue it for a following year?
Yeah, so when reading the budgets, I would notice this section called carry forward. But unfortunately, with the most recent budget, it did not break down how much of the carry forward was just for cycling. John?
And Rob, when you said only 3 kilometers was made last year, and they're counting both sides of the street as double the distance, right?
So when I measure 3 kilometers, I'm only going by centerline kilometers, which is the old way of measuring bike lanes. I think 5 years ago they started using lane kilometers, which is effectively doubling the number, but no progress.
Yeah, so that's pretty
What's the bottleneck? Is it council approval? Is it staff resources? Towards getting these bike lanes.
Well, I think there are both factors at play, but so far with the new cycling manager, Becky Katz, I'm pretty optimistic with the things that she and their team have been coming up with lately. Okay.
Just anecdotally hearing about all the shopping and the interest of merchants along some of these routes, is that an argument that you pitched to the city in terms of all the additional money that goes into these areas as a result of the cycling traffic?
Yeah, well, when the blower bike lanes were studied in 2017, TCATS actually factored in the spending, and they showed that consumer spending went up, and a great share of customers would spend more than $100.
I can attest to that.